Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about how new car dealers are sending brand new cars to auction and how they're not selling at auction and what this means for the market moving forward. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So first off, let's talk about how it's even possible that these dealers are selling new cars at auction, because, I mean, if you just think about it for a second, an automaker doesn't want a car dealership to sell a brand new car at auction. They want that dealership to sell that car to an actual consumer, not some used car dealer or someone who's just trying to flip the vehicle at auction. And so they're going to do everything they can to push dealers to not do this practice, but there are still a lot of ways that dealers can engage in this. So first off, what a lot of dealers will do is pretty straightforward. They'll just simply sell the brand new car at auction, and whoever buys it basically has to buy that car brand new from the dealer, and it gets titled under their name. And yes, the dealer still pays auction fees and everything, and this frankly doesn't really raise any red flags for the manufacturer because, well, dealers sell cars to businesses all the time. And so if a dealer sells a car to a used car lot, then all the manufacturer sees is that, oh, this car is sold to this LLC or whatever it may be, and they go, well, that's a brand new car that the dealership sold, and that's really all they care about. And so, or all they can really see. I mean, I guess they could look at the Carfax, but that's not what they're looking at. They're just looking at, you know, the POC and everything. But regardless, the point that I'm trying to make here is that dealers can just sell these brand new cars at auction just like that. Now, some dealers are kind of worried about ruining their relationship with their manufacturer, and they want to hide things a little bit more. So what they'll sometimes do is title the vehicle before they sell it at auction. So what they'll typically do is have like the store owner, you know, quote unquote, buy the car, right? Put it under their name, and then they'll sell it at the auction as a used car with no miles, and then the car will be a two-owner vehicle by the time that it sells at auction. And so that's another way that the dealerships can kind of get these cars into auction. And the reason that they do, you know, someone like the owner of the store is because, well, since they're the owner of the store, they can keep everything within the business, keep everything tidy from a paperwork perspective. And you obviously don't want to be titling vehicles under salespeople's names or anything like that, because that could be a legal train wreck at the end of the day. And so those are really the two main ways that dealerships sell cars at auction. It's actually a pretty straightforward process, but now let's actually talk about why a dealership might want to sell a car at auction. So first off, since dealers can do a number of things to make it so that these auction sales actually count as retail sales, they can use this as a tool to do a number of things. So first off, if they have a new car number they're trying to hit at the end of a particular month, quarter, or at the end of a year, then they could just haul off a bunch of their inventory to auction to then hit that new car number. Because again, if it gets titled under a business, it still technically counts as a sale for the dealership, which means that they are that much closer to hitting their new car number. And so that sometimes is a pretty big incentive for dealerships. And on a side note, something that a lot of dealers will actually engage in at the end of every single month, if they're trying to, or not every single month, but the months they're trying to hit a new car number, is quickly not only selling cars at auction, but selling cars to fleet companies like rental car companies, for example, to hit that number. So there's a lot more, you know, quote unquote, wholesaling with new cars than people actually realize. Now, the next reason why a dealer might send a car to auction, a brand new car, is because they just want to get rid of it. It's old age inventory. They feel like they can't sell it, and they would rather just, you know, take the loss now, send it to auction, and just get rid of it, get it off the books. Even if they're not trying to hit a number or anything, they just want to get rid of that car, so then they can hopefully get an allocation for something different that they can actually sell. And so you'll sometimes just see new car dealers get rid of old age inventory. And so that's why, you know, from time to time, you'll all of a sudden see these influxes of used cars that are basically brand new with no miles at used car dealers. It's probably two car dealers just trying to get rid of stuff that they don't exactly want. Now, the next big incentive for new car dealers with sending cars to auction is because of the market dynamics that we're experiencing currently. So I just made a video talking about how within different regions in the US, you could have vastly different pricing on both new and used vehicles. Dealerships know this. And so if a dealership is in a market where their product is not all that hot and they can't sell it for a lot of money, they might go the auction route and auction it off in a region where that product is selling for substantially more. I've heard tons of stories of dealers basically going and auctioning off brand new vehicles for huge price premiums over their original MSRP, again, at auction to other dealers, because they're just selling it to a dealer in another market that will then be able to mark it up even more and sell it to another customer. Now, again, this is something that manufacturers obviously hate, because this car just gets flipped from one person to the next and the price just keeps going up. And then, it puts a lot of people out of the market for that product because of the pricing that happens on the vehicle. But it's something that dealers do to make a little bit of extra money if they don't happen to have the clientele in their market. And again, I mentioned this in the prior video, but I'll mention it again. Car markets are localized. The average person, rather, is not willing to travel all that far to purchase a vehicle. And so that's why you'll have these different markets throughout the US. However, sending cars to auction is not necessarily the best play for car dealers for a number of reasons. First off, if their respective manufacturer finds out what they're doing, whatever method they're using, they could get in quite a bit of trouble. And what the manufacturer will typically do is they'll just throttle the allocation that dealer gets. And I know that some people might say, why would the manufacturer care at the end of the day? Because they are ultimately wholesaling those vehicles to dealers. They've already made their money, so it shouldn't matter where the vehicles go. But again, manufacturers do care, because they care a lot about brand image. And if their product is just getting sold at auction to a bunch of people that are going to flip it, for example, that's not necessarily going to be good for their brand image. And so that's why, again, if they find out the dealers are doing this, then they will typically, again, throttle the amount of allocation that they get. Now, the next thing is actually a downside for the dealership, or more importantly, the dealership staff. So with these auction deals, most of the dealership staff typically isn't going to get paid for it at all. It's usually just going to be the dealership itself and then the dealership owner, because this isn't a normal transaction. And so since you're not having to have, a salesperson, interact with a customer and then a manager work the deal and all that kind of stuff, like, there's no reason for them to get paid, right? It makes sense. And so if a dealership decides to offload a bunch of their inventory at auction, then that's fewer cars for their sales staff to sell. And since they're not getting paid on those deals that go to auction, that means that they're just going to make less money overall, which means that that'll increase the chances that they will quit that dealership and move to another one. And dealerships definitely do not want that, because the best possible case scenario for a dealership is to have sales staff and management staff stay there for as long as possible, because the longer a person is at a dealership, typically, not always, but typically, the better they are for that store. Like I said, there definitely are some outliers with that, but that is the biggest negative impact, is just to the staff at the dealership. Now, the last thing that I need to mention before we talk about why dealers are now sending way more cars to auction than what we typically see in a normal car market is the fact that new cars are substantially different from used cars from a value perspective. Used cars have a wholesale value, and that wholesale value can decline on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis, month-to-month basis, and frankly, that's what happens in a normal car market. Wholesale values decline over time. Whereas with new cars, since they aren't titled, they don't have a wholesale value that's just ticking down every single day. Yes, manufacturers will release incentives and dealers will release discounts on new cars to try to get them off the lot if it's older age inventory. But again, new cars don't have wholesale values, and that's very important. Since they don't have a value that is constantly ticking down like a used car, dealers are okay with keeping new car inventory on hand for longer than used car inventory, because it's not costing them as much money in depreciation, or it's not costing them money in depreciation like the used cars. Hopefully that makes sense. But now let's talk about why these dealers are sending these new cars to auction. So the first big reason as to why dealers are sending cars to auction now more than what we typically see in a normal market is because of allocation. Allocation is very important to car dealers, especially with what we've experienced over the last few years. And so these dealers basically want to set themselves up to where they are going to get the most amount of allocation possible. So that means they don't want to have any new car inventory at all at the end of every single month. And one brand that I'll give you as an example is Toyota. Toyota has quite a bit of demand still for their product. And so Toyota dealers are heavily incentivized to have zero product on their lot, brand new product at the end of every single month. And so they're kind of incentivized to sell cars to, fleet companies or sell cars at auction if they still have inventory on hand, so then they can get the most amount of allocation. Because what Toyota is doing right now, for example, is they're looking at the dealers across the nation and they're seeing the dealers that have inventory and that don't have inventory. And if a dealer is completely selling out of their inventory every single month, then they're probably going to give them a little bit more, because they're like, oh, there's more demand in that area. And this is frankly is what every single manufacturer does, even in a normal car market. But right now, it's more important than it ever has been because of low supply with certain brands. So all of the brands where there's low supply, there's big incentive for dealers to sell cars at auction. Now, with the brands where there is really high supply, there's actually a lot less incentive. And this is where a lot of people are getting this story wrong, because what you'll typically see is people will say that these dealers can't afford their floor plans anymore, and so they're having to sell these new cars at auction so that they can just get off of this inventory because they just need to sell it now and take a loss now. And that's just not reality. New car dealers are used to having way more inventory than they have today. And so with the inventory levels that we're experiencing right now, it's costing dealers money, but it's not costing them enough to where they're in a massive amount of pain. You have to remember that new car dealers have a lot of different avenues of revenue. Again, they have service departments, they have parts departments, and obviously they have the new car inventory, they have the used car inventory. Like, there's just so many different revenue sources. And so that's where everyone's getting it wrong. It's more about dealers basically setting themselves up for strong allocation rather than dealers having too much inventory and they're trying to get rid of that excess inventory. And then finally, the last point that I mentioned earlier, where dealers can see that their vehicles are selling for more in different markets, is another reason as to why we're seeing more vehicles, new vehicles, sold at auction. These dealers understand the market that we are in, and they know that the market is going to continue to go down, and so they're just basically trying to get some quick cash. If another dealer in another region is willing to pay over MSRP for the cars they have in their lot, like, they'd be stupid to not take that, because especially if they're in a region where they're having to discount their product, it's like, why sell it to a customer at a discount when you can sell it to another dealer and make some money just right away? And so that's another reason why we're starting to see more of these sales at auction currently compared to a normal market, is because frankly it's a good profit center for dealers right now. And with the profit declines that we've seen over the last year, it makes sense as to why dealers are trying to get creative with making money in as many avenues as they can possibly manage. So that's pretty much going to sum things up for today's video, talking about why new car dealers are sending cars to auction, and hopefully that kind of clears up the whole situation. But I'm sure we're still going to see videos of people talking about how dealers are selling these new cars at auction because they're struggling with their floor plans and all that kind of stuff. And like I've said over the course of this whole series, used car dealers, yeah, that definitely could be true, but new car dealers, they're doing just fine. I wouldn't stress about your new car dealer friends. They're still going to be able to pay their bills and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, that'll sum things up. I'll see you guys.